We have just seen the first war of the 21st century.
Aftershocks of terror.
The words can't just describe it.
Fighting words from the American president.
And I am confident there will be universal approval of the actions this government takes.
Get down on your hands and knees and come to the north!
Heroes to the rescue.
At first, you just look at it, it's so bizarre, you think it's a dream, but it's not.
Amid the rubble, hope. Buried firefighters found alive.
Shaking his hand. I believe the man himself is fine.
We found the two guys and they managed to walk out on their own.
For others, the frantic search continues.
Tom's name is on the list. It says fine. Nobody else's name's on it.
Right now, it's where is he and when will I see him again?
The whole country digs deeper.
Do what you can when you feel so helpless.
With volunteers answering the call.
When people see this, they'll know that America is united. We are strong. We are stronger than ever.
Now that war has been declared on us, we will lead the world to victory. To victory.
Attack on America.
This is continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America. Dan Rather with Ed Bradley at CBS News World Headquarters in New York. Here are the headlines at this hour. As the search goes through another night in the shattered World Trade Center in New York City and at the Pentagon in Washington. The confirmed death toll is now nearing 500, but it's feared the final count could top 5,000. The flight data recorder from one of the 4 jets hijacked Tuesday has been recovered. And searchers at the Pentagon are working their way toward another. Investigators say they have identified the hijackers and that they have pictures of all of those in the planes. The Pentagon says it's planning sustained military action against the terrorists and those who support them. Defense officials want to call up as many as 50,000 reserve troops to active duty, possibly soon. Secretary of State Powell named renegade Saudi millionaire Osama bin Laden by name as a, quote, prime suspect. The United States has asked Pakistan to close its border, seal it off with Afghanistan, whose Taliban leaders protect bin Laden. And President Bush declared the United States will lead the world to victory over terrorism. In Lower Manhattan this day, hope went head-to-head with grim reality. Scott Pelley reports on search and rescue at Ground Zero. Scott?
Dan, at one point today, just for a moment in Lower Manhattan, there were cheers of joy as 2 firemen who were feared lost were rescued in the debris today.
How dangerous this work is. 2 firefighters looking for victims fell into a void and had to be rescued themselves. It was a moment of life in another day of death in Lower Manhattan. The city officially estimates 4,700 missing, but everyone here expects that to climb much higher.
Can you tell me what you've seen today?
It's amazing. It's just incredible. Indescribable.
What do you mean?
It's just, no words describe it. It's terrible.
Can you give me a sense of what you're seeing in there?
It's hard to explain. I mean, everything's destroyed. Where we were digging out, I mean, we were probably standing on the roof of the building as we were digging out, and all you're seeing is the tops of fire engines and cars, and trying to listen to see if anybody was in there.
Wait a minute, you're digging through the debris, and what you're finding are the tops of fire engines.
Right, and cars and whatnot.
What are you seeing in terms of the victims down there?
Spread out. There's stuff and people, everywhere.
They're running in shifts. Exhausted firefighters going out, fresh hands going in. They're coming from all over, some from Los Angeles, others from Michigan, and all around New York State. The firemen are working under hanging steel and buildings that threaten to fall. That's the Millennium Hotel, unstable and towering over hundreds of men and women digging for signs of life. There was more smoke over Manhattan today. Fires are erupting repeatedly, even 2 days after the attack. I see a fire now. We keep seeing fires again and again every few hours.
What's spot fire? It's very difficult to get inside that amount, that rubble to extinguish every spot fire.
You don't want to pour a lot of water on there because that water will be filling some voids where maybe we have some people. So, you know, that the water will travel from where that spot fire is and seek the lowest level. And if that's where there's people, you know, you don't want to dump too much water in there.
This is the underground area where there is still hope of life, the extensive basement complex of the World Trade Towers. Rescue workers are searching with flashlights and listening with sensitive microphones for any sign of a survivor.
Sending listening devices in through pockets. Tell me about that.
When they think they found something, whether it's an indication from a dog or an indication from one of the guys may have spotted something, they'll send down a listening device and they yell for the entire area to quiet down. When they do that, you can hear a pin drop in that whole area.
Everybody stops.
Everybody stops. Nobody moves. They shut down generators. Everybody just stops moving.
Dogs are guiding rescuers to any human scent. This dog named Miranda is being handled by Sergeant Dale Warkey.
I send her down and she looks to see if she can find anybody.
What have you found?
Any kind of alerts.
What have you found so far?
Just remains. That's all.
Can you describe to me what you've seen?
Words can't even describe it. It's just unbelievable, the mess in there.
Alongside the search for bodies, there is a search for clues. Detective Bill Levasseur is hunting for any part of the black box voice and data recorders that would have been on the hijacked planes.
Some of the elements of the plane flew all over. I understand the engine was up on Church Street, tire was down on Rector, so we're looking everywhere for any pieces of evidence.
So the black box could be anywhere within half a square mile from here?
Well, it could be here, it could be anywhere. We're just making sure, a thorough search to make sure we don't miss anything.
FBI agents are walking the streets with trash bags, scooping up anything that looks like evidence. It's hard to tell, given the shattered debris.
It was like a scene out of Apocalypse Now, or a scene out of hell.
This iron worker volunteered to help lift the mass of metal, but he's never seen steel like this.
The steel came down, and the pieces that came down actually stuck into the West Side Highway and are sticking up like toothpicks.
That's the shattered skeleton of the Trade Center, but emergency room radiologists told us about the broken bodies that they saw in the first hours.
We've seen the X-rays. We've seen CAT scans and the X-rays of people with crushed heads. Fortunately alive, but some pretty bad injuries.
Not even the dead are spared here. At the nearby and historic Trinity Church, graves are buried alongside the police and fire vehicles crushed under the falling towers. This is what's left of an ambulance that was among the first at the scene. There are continuing worries, of course, about the safety of the living. This response team from the EPA is testing the choking air over Manhattan. What concern is there about the air quality where the workers are?
Well, we've been asked to sample for a whole bunch of different stuff, so I don't know that there's any particular concern other than they want to know exactly what there is there, so we'll try to determine that for them.
They want to know what these guys have been breathing for the last 2 days.
Right.
Asbestos, any number of hazardous kinds of materials.
Asbestos is one of the concerns. You'll have to excuse me, I got to kind of get dressed.
It's all right, keep going. That dust has become a kind of message board. Residents who live here are sending wishes to firemen they will never meet or know. Many are leaving these notes on their way uptown, evacuating for who knows how long. Refugees in a city that they no longer recognize.
It'll never be the same. Everybody's devastated down here. It's people just walking around with like these empty looks on their faces. I feel terrible for all those people that died.
This city, so famous for its toughness, seems a fragile place at times. Elsewhere in Manhattan today, former President Bill Clinton and his daughter Chelsea came into the city to see for themselves and to talk to New Yorkers. We had a chance to talk to them about this attack on the United States. The former president came to the place in Manhattan where hundreds and perhaps thousands of people are standing in line waiting to fill out missing persons reports. Mr. Clinton spoke with many of the people as they waited in line.
Chelsea and I wanted to just go down there and encourage people, thank the workers. And I've never seen anything like it, but the people have rallied magnificently. All these people working to get their friends and neighbors out of the rubble, and I think the mayor's done a terrific job with the governor. New Yorkers are pulling together.
Sir, you fought terrorism all 8 years of your administration, and yet it wasn't enough. It's never enough.
We nearly, well, it'll never be enough as long as there are people out there with money and networks and who are willing to die and have a whole different view of human life and values than we do. But let me say, I believe the president and the administration will do the right thing. I think they're doing everything that can humanly be done. When they ascertain all the facts, I think they will take the appropriate action. And I believe that the magnitude of this has generated support for the United States and for taking action against these people that did not exist before. And that will open up some options for the president that would not have been there before. And I just think it's very important that the American people this time just pull together and support and trust them all to do the right thing.
What's the message?
The message is that this is an act which was both evil and which denies our common humanity. And what we Americans have to do, what New Yorkers have to do, is to prove them wrong. You just walk up and down the street here. We got people here from everywhere, people of all different faiths. The American people know this is not something done by all Muslims, that America is full of Muslims who deplore this sort of behavior and who are just as offended, if not more offended, than the rest of the South. And we just need to take care of the victims and the families of those who have died, and the children who will need to be educated. We need to rebuild New York, and we need to support the president and the administration in answering this challenge. But they will do it. We will do it as a people. I have no doubt of it.
The president's daughter, Chelsea Clinton, was in Lower Manhattan at the time of the attack.
I was about 12 blocks from here.
You were 12 blocks from here?
South.
What did you see?
Smoke, people running, crying, just what we've all seen replayed on the television. It was horrifying, of course.
And what do you make of this?
I don't think there's anything to make of it. It's just a tragedy.
Chelsea Clinton. All over southern Manhattan today, they were cleaning up. We saw people with hoses spraying down sidewalks, street sweepers, tow trucks pulling shattered cars away, structural engineers running through buildings to figure out whether they're safe to reoccupy in the area. The financial district is getting ready for business again, even though the hard work of search and recovery will be going on for a very long time. Dan?
Scott Pelley. Joining us now is Pete Bicarsi, a rescue worker with the National Urban Search and Rescue. It's part of FEMA, the Federal Disaster Relief Agency. He's from Denver, but he's among those digging deep here in New York City. We also have Tom Kennedy from the Urban Search and Rescue Team. Thank you very much for being with us. What are you seeing? And as you see it, what are you feeling as you go about your work? Mr. Kennedy? Tom Kennedy?
Yes, Dan, I got you now. We're currently one of the first teams that was deployed to support the city of New York for this disaster. And I think the first thing that struck the task force members was the magnitude of the situation. We've had the opportunity during downtime to see it on television, but I can assure you that the television press is not able to deliver the size of the operation and the area of disaster that this encompasses.
Mr. Kennedy, Do you feel a sense of real and present danger as you're going about your work?
Yes and no. And what's going on is we're operating in areas that are dangerous, but the training that FEMA has provided to the task forces throughout the United States are going to get us through this. Nobody's being placed in jeopardy for this operation. However, it's still being conducted as an actual rescue.
As an actual rescue, is that because you still believe or just simply hope that there may be some people alive in that rubble?
No, we believe there is. Experiences in this country and other countries have shown that people can last for days and possibly even weeks under this type of situation. So all the efforts now are still focused as a rescue operation.
And looking at it, based on your experience, is this likely to take a month, 2 months, longer? What's your own personal estimate?
To be honest with you, we arrived on late Monday night and went into action on Tuesday morning. And not until today did we get a full opportunity to work the entire site other than the spot at church and day to which we were deployed. Normally task force members are deployed for 2 weeks, but my best guess is that this is going to take months before that whole area is cleared and the last person is taken out.
Tom Kenny, thank you very much for taking time out from your work. Good luck. Take care of yourself out there.
Thank you.
Joining us now, the governor of the state of New York, George Pataki, who's been in the trenches here from day one. Good evening, Governor. Thanks for taking time to be with us.
Thank you, Dan.
For the people in this country, for that matter, people around the world, what do you think is the most important thing for them to know about this situation as New York continues trying to deal with an unprecedented calamity?
Well, I think the most important thing is that we all stand together. The spirit is strong. The effort is still focusing on search and rescue. We still hope for miracles, and thousands of New Yorkers, millions of people around the world are praying for those who are missing and praying for the families, and we're all grateful for that.
Ed Bradley has a question.
What is the latest number of missing that you have now?
It is pretty high. It's well over 4,000. But, Ed, we're hopeful that people will turn up, that we'll find out that there are duplicate names on the list. We're still hoping for a miracle where someone might be found alive at the site. So it's not so much the numbers. It's each person. And that's why this effort is being made.
Well, with that in mind, Governor, you've just come from talking with some of the families who have missing members of their family. What concrete assistance are you able to offer them?
We're doing everything we can to provide them with information, which is what they most want, to provide them with help and counseling. Sometimes just to give them a shoulder to cry on and give them a hug. I think the most important thing is for them to know they're not alone. You know, we all are experiencing enormous grief, not just around America, but around the world. But we can only imagine the grief of someone whose wife or child is missing. And that's why we have to be there with them. That's why we have to show them. We're with them today, and we'll be with them always.
I don't know anyone who doesn't applaud and admire President Bush's coming to New York City tomorrow for the symbolism of it. But will you be discussing any real substantive issues with him here, and if so, what?
I'm very grateful that President Bush is coming. I think it is important, and it shows his ongoing commitment. But, Dan, from the first minutes when we first spoke before 9:30 on Tuesday morning, the President has provided every single bit of support that the city or the state has requested, and we're very grateful for that. This is a time when not just all New Yorkers, but all Americans have come together, and we're grateful for the support of President Bush, for his leadership, and for the fact that he is coming here tomorrow.
Governor, given your position and your background, I feel okay to ask this question. There are an awful lot of people who now believe that it's just going to tip the country into a recession, perhaps a brief one, but a recession. Do you agree with that assessment?
Dan, right now the focus has to be on the human side. This is a strong country. We are a strong people. And certainly there are enormous economic losses, and we will deal with those, and we have a task force right now working to deal with those. But we have to focus on people. We have to focus on keeping the spirit of the people up. We'll get through this. We'll get through this economically, but more importantly, we'll get through this from the personal human side because all of us, all Americans and people around the world are standing together.
Governor George Pataki, thank you for coming by.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ed.
Let's go now to correspondent David Martin with tonight's latest developments from the Pentagon. David?
Dan, it's clear tonight the U.S. is planning an all-out war, not just against Osama bin Laden for having directed these attacks, but against all terrorist organizations that threaten American interests. It will be a war like no other.
The kind of organizations that conduct these terrorist activities make for difficult targets. It is not as if you are going after an army in the field or you're trying to destroy cities or fixed installations.
Attacking bin Laden's camps in Afghanistan, as the U.S. did 3 years ago, is not going to put him out of business.
They're also a thinking enemy. They know what they've done, they know when they're going to do it, and they know what consequences might be coming back in their direction. So you have to consider you're dealing with a very, very skilled, knowledgeable, thinking enemy.
U.S. officials say they are drafting plans to attack not just bin Laden, but the Taliban rulers of Afghanistan who allow him to operate from their territory. By threatening the Taliban with destruction, the U.S. hopes to force them to turn bin Laden over. And it's not just bin Laden the U.S. is after.
When we're through with that network, we will continue with a global assault against terrorism in general.
A senior official named the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah, which in 1983 killed more than 200 American Marines in Beirut, and Hamas, which sends suicide bombers against Israeli civilians, as two of the terrorist groups the U.S. intends to go after. And the Deputy Secretary of Defense explained what it will take to win.
You do it with the full resources of the U.S. government. It will be a campaign, not a single action. And we're going to keep after these people and the people who support them until this stops.
The U.S. has launched cruise missiles and arrested bin Laden's accomplices, but that hasn't stopped the terrorists.
One of the things these guys have demonstrated is that as hard as we look, they can hide some things from us, and that's why we're going to try to deny them the sanctuaries and the places from which they do hide things.
Bodies pulled from the Pentagon arrived at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware for identification, as the Defense Department estimated the total number of dead at 190, 126 people in the building and 64 more aboard the plane. Fear of a further collapse is making the task of recovering the bodies agonizingly slow.
We would all like it to go very quickly, but in doing things quickly, you have a very unstable building, and it's almost at a crawling pace.
It also slows the hunt for the plane's cockpit voice recorder, which could answer so many questions about the final moments.
They thought they knew where it was, that it is, we are close to it, but close doesn't mean a short period of time.
There is no real hope of survivors, but one find did raise spirits. The Marine Corps colors still standing amid the wreckage.
Everyone was pretty, for the past 2 days, surprised that, we had a set of Marine Corps colors intact. And so that was pretty symbolic of, why we're all here.
And Dan, one other indication of what this war will cost. Tonight, the Pentagon is asking the president for authority to call up 30,000 to 50,000 reservists. Dan?
David Martin, the Pentagon. Now, let's go to Jim Stewart at our Washington Bureau for the latest on the criminal investigation in the attack. Jim?
Dan, here's the latest. Police are searching a house in Vienna, Virginia tonight where the terrorist hijackers who flew into the Pentagon might have stayed before the attack. And in New York, one man is in custody and others are being questioned after a scare over fake identities that led to the FAA shutting down all 3 New York airports. Meanwhile, the easiest part of this investigation may be over. Authorities are poised to release the names and photographs of the estimated 18 hijackers, but federal investigators are still not certain they have accounted for all the terrorist pilots.
The terrorists who seized controls of the planes all attended aviation school in the United States, some as recently as a year ago, and FBI agents were busy today searching the former apartment of 2 of the suspects who were at the controls during the World Trade Center attacks. Using airport surveillance video, credit card receipts, and the passenger list, the FBI believes it has identified all the hijackers on the 4 flights.
Unless contradicted by evidence which we wouldn't anticipate, 2 planes had 5 hijackers and 2 other planes had 4 hijackers each.
What is not as clear, however, is whether the dead hijackers left behind some live colleagues who may have attended the same aviation classes. Sources say the flight school records are being closely examined.
We are continuing to develop an understanding of all the associates that these individuals had.
In other developments, sources say there is no evidence thus far that any other nation was involved in the attack. Some of the hijackers had lived in the U.S. for more than a year, say sources, and others were associated with the Islamic fundamentalist group believed to be responsible for attacking the USS Cole. Meanwhile, the collection of physical evidence continued, with agents recovering what reads like a suicide note from the rental car of one suspect, while in Hamburg, Germany, police raided an apartment there based on an FBI request. There were also some dramatic arrests like these at Newark International Airport, where 4 people were taken off a Saudi Arabian airliner, but it remains unclear whether they were associated with Tuesday's attacks. What is also not clear is just how much help the actual hijackers had, although agents assume it was a sizable network both here and abroad.
The number of associates is significant, but I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to try and attach a specific number.
Dan, federal authorities are expected to show America the face of the men who carried out these attacks. Agents are busily assembling photographs of all 18 hijackers, complete with their names and nationalities. They are expected to be released sometime Friday. Dan?
Jim, do we already know some of the countries from where some of these suicide pilots came?
Yes, Dan, we do. We know that some came from Saudi Arabia. These were apparently pilots who trained down in Florida. We know that some came from, I'm sorry, Dan, I wanted to say some did not come from Iraq. And we know that some came from Egypt. These were apparently the members of the Egyptian Islamic fundamentalist movement. Dan?
Jim Stewart, thanks. Late today, the flight recorder was found from United Flight 93. That's the plane which down to earth Tuesday morning in southwest Pennsylvania. Bob Orr brings you up to date on that. Bob?
Well, Dan, that could be a break for investigators because that flight data recorder, if it's operating correctly, could provide investigators with important information on how United 757 was being flown in the last few minutes before the crash. But I have to tell you, investigators also need the cockpit voice recorder. That's the second black box to have a full picture of what happened on board the doomed jetliner. That, investigators hope, will have recorded the conversations as the hijackers tried to steer that plane to Washington, and as it turns out, towards a very high-profile target.
Tuesday's attack ended in rural Pennsylvania when the last of the 4 hijacked jetliners, United Airlines Flight 93, nosedived into the ground. But sources say as the wave of terrorism unfolded, it was that plane the Secret Service feared most after a telephone threat made it clear the target was Air Force One. When United Flight 93 took off from Newark at 8:43, Air Force One was parked in Sarasota waiting to take the president home from an education event. No one believes the hijackers ever intended to attack the president's plane in midair. But in just over an hour, both jets would be heading towards Andrews Air Force Base. At 9:35, United 93 veered from its planned flight route and headed back towards Washington. With the World Trade Center towers already on fire, the jet's erratic movements were enough to convince controllers that this plane, too, had been hijacked. Just 3 minutes later, at 9:38, American Airlines Flight 77 plowed into the Pentagon. The first hit in what authorities now believe was to be a double-barreled attack on Washington. Within minutes, at around 9:45, orders were given to evacuate the White House. On board Flight 93, a number of passengers, learning of the New York attacks and cell phone calls with families, decided to take back the plane.
On the last phone call, he said that a group of them were getting ready to do something. And then he hung up and he never called back.
In Florida, the president was told of the terrorism and cut short his visit. At 9:54, Air Force One took off for Washington. Flight 93, meanwhile, continued flying east into western Pennsylvania. And at 10:03, someone in the cockpit deliberately turned off critical radar information, leaving controllers in the dark about the movements of a jet that was now a flying bomb on a course for the nation's capital. Along Florida's Atlantic coast, Air Force One continued to fly north, but suddenly at 10:14, the president's plane turned to the west. About 6 minutes later, the fight for control on board Flight 93 ended as the 757 with 45 people on board crashed in an unpopulated field. Air Force One, now out of danger, continued on, landing at Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base at 11:45. Today, the president defended the decision to divert Air Force One.
I know I took the appropriate actions as the commander-in-chief to be in a position to be able to make the decisions necessary for our government to handle the crisis.
There is also some new information tonight about the other hijacked jetliner that did hit the Pentagon. Republican Congressman John Mica, he's the chairman of the House Aviation Subcommittee, says he's been told by police that that plane may have actually flown over the White House and in fact circled the Capitol building before hitting the military headquarters. Mica called it, quote, sheer in-your-face terrorism. Dan?
Bob Orr, thank you. The past 48 hours have brought more than enough sorrow and worry for the whole country to bear. Russ Mitchell has the story of one place that's dealing with more than its share.
In the town of Bedford, New York, 45 miles from the World Trade Center, these 4 women are missing their husbands.
That's my husband. We just got married in June.
All 4 men worked at Cantor Fitzgerald, a bond trading firm, on the 105th floor in Tower Number 1.
I know they're together. I know they're together.
These wives are not just linked by this tragedy. They are friends. Their lives are intertwined.
There's been great times, you know. My kids grew up here. They love it here.
They have a past together, and they want a future together.
Very caring people.
They are gathered at Robbie Morell's house, a sort of emotional command post.
Can I have the Cantor numbers?
Every time that phone rings,
yes.
What goes through your head?
Good information.
Good information.
Robbie Morell last spoke to her husband, George, Tuesday morning.
My husband called me on my way to work on my cell phone at 10 of 9.
10 of 9.
10 of 9.
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning. He said, there's been a bomb, and I may never see you again, so I want to tell you I love you.
What keeps you optimistic? What gives you hope?
Because I know George is a survivor, and if there was any possible way to make it down, and he did it before.
In 1993, George Morell survived the first World Trade Center bombing by walking down all 105 flights to safety.
It's just a picture that was in the New York Times the following Sunday, I believe.
Which, in a way, keeps Robbie going this time.
It's got 9 lives.
Something else that is bringing hope to this house is a list found on the internet.
Somebody's got to go get me another copy of this list.
Okay.
On it are the names of possible survivors.
And they did see Tommy's name.
Lisa Palazzo's husband, Tom, is on the list.
Come on, you know Tommy and George are going to be together, right?
With newfound hope, Lisa takes the lead in encouraging her friends.
They're together. Don't be silly. We're going to get the list. She's bringing it down right now.
Julie Burke and her husband, Tom, have 4 boys.
8, 6, 2, and 10 months. So I've kept them home from school and kept it pretty close to the cuff with them because I don't think it's time to tell them yet what's really going on. They're asking, but I can look them in the eye and say I really don't know. And that's better than the worst case scenario right now.
She has heard nothing from her husband. All she has now is the name of a friend who worked close by.
Okay. O'Neill's name is on the list and he's fine.
Oh my God. Sean O'Neill.
His buddy's name turned up on the list. He sits right next to him, so it's really encouraging.
This is a list and it's hopeful and I'm excited about it, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions till I have more confirmation.
Holly O'Neill is Sean's wife.
I just want to see him. I just want to see him.
Holly is expecting their first child in March. On a day where the news is mostly all bad, these women must rely on the slimmest of hopes. And this list is all they have.
As soon as we find out, we're going to find a way to go down. And try to get him out of there and bring him home.
But there is really nowhere to go.
Describe to me what the waiting is like.
How can I describe that? It's pretty indescribable. Especially when you glance over and see the building falling in and everything else. Right now, I don't care who did it. I just want to find George, and that's really the only thing I'm thinking about.
But as the digging continues around what used to be the World Trade Center, the wives of Bedford are looking with less and less hope at their internet list.
What did I just say?
Just tonight, Robbie Morell sent her husband's dental records to authorities in New York.
Russ Mitchell. So many thousands were forced to flee in this week's attacks. Ed Bradley has the story of one family standing its ground. Ed?
Dan, every morning millions of families wake up in this city, but for some, it's a lot different than it used to be.
Wake up, you dinosaurs. Time to eat your breakfast.
It's time for the Adams sisters, Zoe, age 5.5, and Tess, age 3, to begin another morning in their apartment in downtown Manhattan.
They've been sleeping great and having good dreams.
You're a dinosaur.
We have made the decision that the best thing is to keep a normal life going.
Life inside their home appears normal, but outside it's anything but. While thousands fled their neighborhood,
I work across the street from the World Trade Center. Horrible.
You're out of here.
I'm out of here.
You want to play the monkeys, Tessie?
the Adams family, Father Cleveland, Mother Kelly, and their daughters, made a different decision, a decision to stay, even though they live 5 blocks north of the World Trade Center, Ground Zero.
When the airplanes first hit, I told Zoe, "Oh, they'll be fine. You know, the towers are strong. They'll stand."
But of course, she was wrong. Now, in a 21st century war zone, Kelly Adams isn't about to budge.
There's probably some part of that spirit of, you know, we're not running away. You know, I feel like we would be abandoning our neighborhood and abandoning our city.
There's no electricity, no hot water, no conveniences. Even milk is hard to find. But the family decided, amidst all the tragedy, it had to stay, to make a statement. They believed the worst was over.
I saw no reason that we should make a move. There's a lot of chaos out there. If they're attacking the World Trade Centers, they've hit their mark. This would be a safe place to be.
The day of the attack, Zoe was beginning her second day of kindergarten.
We're actually out in the schoolyard when the first plane impacted on the World Trade Tower, and they saw the towers on fire. They were very, very upset.
They ran home.
My older daughter came up and said, "Mom, are any more buildings going to fall?" And so we sat down on the couch, all 4 of us, and we talked about it. You know, and we talked about how there are bad people in the world.
I believe that our decision to stay in our home and let the initial chaos pass was correct.
Zoe's dad, Cleveland, began to keep a diary of the ordeal on his laptop computer.
The street was filling with people staring up in disbelief. There was a huge hole in the north side of the nearest tower. The heat must have become excruciatingly hot. People were jumping from the broken windows.
The Adams family knows life will never be the same, but they know they will endure.
I feel a rush of fear anytime I hear a plane go by. I'll try to walk to work tomorrow like any other day.
That's the way it is for most New Yorkers, Dan, some more than others, just trying to make it through another day.
Really strong. I'll try to go to work tomorrow just like it's another day. Ed Bradley, thanks. In roughly the past 48 hours, sights and sounds of an infamous day and the aftermath have been seared into the American psyche.
People in the street. We got a door in here. Right here, John. Right here.
You got a light?
I can see the light. Get down on your hands and knees and come to the noise. Johnny, where are you? Right here, right here. Come on, come back. Come back. Guys, get in. Not everybody take a peek. Who's out there?
Pictures and words that tell the story. We continue CBS News coverage of the attack on America Now with John Roberts, who's been monitoring today's developments at the White House, including a ratcheting up of security, including reaching the point where reserves are going to be called up. John?
Dan, as a result of an avalanche of intelligence that's been coming in from around the world, the White House undertook new security precautions today. Shortly after noon, the president and the vice president were separated. Dick Cheney is up at Camp David now and will remain there until at least the weekend. At the same time, the Secret Service locked down a 6-block area around the White House. Also tonight, Dan, for the first time, we heard an assessment of just what kind of time frame the administration is projecting it will take to deal with a crisis the likes of which no president has seen before.
The nation must understand this is now the focus of my administration. But now that war has been declared on us, we will lead the world to victory.
From the Oval Office today, echoed in the scarred canyons of New York, the drumbeat of war spread across the nation and around the globe. In Congress, President Bush sought authority to commit the American military into harm's way. And he is working the phones, as his father did 11 years ago in the Gulf War, to build a global coalition against the terrorists who shattered buildings and stole lives.
We have just seen the first war of the 21st century, and there's universal approval of the statements I have made, and I am confident there will be universal approval of the actions this government takes.
Administration officials today sent word to America that they will proceed slowly, that this is a long struggle that will be measured not in days, but weeks and months, perhaps years.
I think it's one of the most complex problems that an American leader has had to face probably since the Civil War.
Historian Stephen Hess says that the task ahead for George Bush defies the sort of conventional response that rose out of the last great attack against American soil, Pearl Harbor.
You had a nation united to a common known enemy, able to fight a war. We know how to fight wars. But what do we do in this very special situation where we have to somehow uproot a terrorist organization, stop them from doing these sorts of things before they kill again?
Already there is a heightened state of alert against those who may kill again. The president's motorcade route to a Washington hospital was today lined by police with automatic weapons. The security cordon around the White House again pushed back. Pennsylvania Avenue now off limits to anyone without a government pass. All of this, says Stephen Hess, will have a lasting effect on how America looks at itself.
For the first time in our lives, we feel that we can be threatened in our homes. We can be threatened in the skies overhead. They have reached us. They have reached into Fortress America. And suddenly we have been pierced. And I think that's a profound change in how America is going to look upon the future.
How the president responds to this crisis, the degree of confidence he can restore in a nation shattered, will shape his presidency. There is little argument. This is a defining moment.
This is a terrible moment. But this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.
White House officials tell CBS News tonight that the request from the Pentagon to call up reserve troops is under, quote, active consideration, though they add if the president grants the request, it would be a limited call-up and only for specific reasons, which they would not go into. Dan?
John, about this call-up of reserves, which obviously, if it goes ahead, it'll have far-reaching consequences for so many American families, for the economy, for everything. Is the indication that this call-up is going to be reasonably soon, that is, in a matter of weeks, or something longer than that?
Well, Dan, there wouldn't be any reason to delay a request for a call-up. If the Pentagon asks for the reserves, there's a reason that they're asking for them, and they probably want them sooner rather than later. But let's not forget, when dealing with exactly what role they would play, there's a law, the Posse Comitatus law, that prohibits American servicemen and women from acting in a law enforcement capacity on American soil. So, Dan, it may be that they're being called up to help protect government installations and potentially even, Dan, for joining in any kind of retaliatory force that may be sent overseas.
John Roberts at the White House, thanks. Now let's go over to Capitol Hill and our chief Washington correspondent, Bob Schieffer, who brings it up to date on developments there today. Bob?
Well, Dan, I am with Joe Biden, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and we've been talking all day about how the United States is pressing Pakistan to cooperate and to help in this search for Osama bin Laden, because Pakistan, after all, borders Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden is reportedly in hiding. Senator, you met with the chief of intelligence of the government of Pakistan today. What did you tell him? How did that go? Will we get the cooperation we're asking for?
Well, I told him what the Secretary of State told him, and I had been in contact with the #2 man, Armitage, over the Secretary of State, and said he had to pick sides. We realize it's going to be tough, but he's going to be our friend or enemy. There isn't any in between here. And he was completely, totally cooperative. He indicated not only in general terms that they were going to be with us, but in very specific terms. I don't think it's appropriate for me to say what, but there was literally a list given to him of things we may ask for. And he signed off on that entire list. Now, you say, well, the intelligence guy signed off. He is either the number 1 or number 2 most powerful man in Pakistan. He is the one who helped train the Taliban, put the Taliban in place. He has had a relationship with bin Laden, and I believe he understands.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, let me ask you another question not related to that, and that is, you are the one that Mr. Daschle, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, has asked to frame this sort of war powers resolution, I'll just call it that, right, that the president is asking for. The president apparently wants Congress to endorse military action. How far along are you on that, and have you talked to the president about exactly what he wants here?
No, we haven't had a chance to speak to the president yet. Mr. Callio and the congressional liaison fella has been the one we've been dealing with. And before we get it done, we're going to obviously have to speak to the president. But bottom line is, I think we'll be able to get it done. I think we'll do it. And the reason why it's important is to show solidarity. The president already has authority to act if he wants to.
All right. Dan, back to you.
Bob Schieffer, thanks. You may want to note in an earlier interview with Senator Biden, he acknowledged that while the U.S. can squeeze Pakistan, the current government can squeeze the Taliban has the power to squeeze back on the current government of Pakistan, and Senator Biden wouldn't rule out the possibility that they might even be capable of toppling the government in some way, but, said Senator Biden, it's time they have to choose sides. A major concern in the fallout from the terrorist attacks is the well-being of the U.S. economy. Nobody is focusing on the money now. The focus is on the families that are suffering, but it's inevitable that we talk about the consequences to our economy. Leslie Stahl is with us. She's been looking into it. Leslie?
Dan, there were some signs today that the financial world was beginning to regain its footing. The bond market opened and investors began looking to the future. But for some firms like Cantor Fitzgerald, a major player in bonds, the human suffering was still overwhelming. The company had 4 of the top floors in the first tower that was hit. 1,000 employees, only 300 survived. We spoke this afternoon with the chairman. Howard Lutnick would normally have been at his desk when the plane hit. But on Tuesday morning, he was taking his 5-year-old son to his first day of kindergarten. Most of Lutnick's employees at the World Trade Center are missing, including his own brother, Gary.
I'm missing 700 families, 700 people, 700 people.
You're missing more than 2/3 of your company.
700 people. And it's worse because I don't know of any, not a single person who got down from the building, not a one. And that is just the most brutal statistic, and I'm the one who has to tell everybody, and I tell it to them, and I tell it to them, and I tell it to them. And
yesterday, you set up a center for the families in a hotel here in New York. What did you say? What happened in that room?
They're all looking for answers, and they look, as if somehow I can know the answers for them.
You're the company that when you ask, was anybody completely wiped out? You're the name. Cantor Fitzgerald. The company. What happens to the company now?
Our business is the bond exchange of the world. And
you may have had the largest stake in American Treasury bonds.
We're the market that all the banks and dealers and all the big names they go to buy and sell their bonds. And last year we did $50 trillion in business.
So the bond market opened. How does it open without you?
I got my people together. There are 275 people who survived in New York. We have 1,000 people in London. And we got them together, and I asked them what they wanted to do. That this is what the Treasury wanted to do, and this is what the Fed wanted, and the Treasury said it would be important for America to reopen.
So you're opened. Your company is operating.
At 7 a.m. this morning, I had 260 people. They never slept. I don't know why they did it. I don't know why. They voted that they wanted to open the market, and they stayed up all night. And they worked every second of every minute. So instead of worrying about the person to the left and the person to the right, at 7 a.m. New York time, they opened the bond markets of the world because they wanted to.
Like so many other Wall Street firms forced out of their headquarters, Cantor Fitzgerald survivors are working in a temporary operations center. Theirs is in New Jersey. Is there any sense in your mind and their minds that this is a way to fight back? I mean, to say, you didn't cripple us, you didn't destroy us, you know, we're not going to let you succeed?
I think there's a little of everything. I think everybody's different. I think some people want to don't let them get away with it. And some people said, I cannot be at home. I cannot be at home. Other people said, I can't think about it. You know, so I think it's everything. I think it's amazing human spirit.
Cantor Fitzgerald's people helped make today's trading orderly, almost ordinary. William Donaldson, former chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, watched the day unfold. The bond market today, apparently there was a lot of volatility, but at the end of the day, things settled. Do you take this as a positive sign, a negative sign, a sign of hesitancy, a sign of lack of confidence?
I think it's a natural sign. I think as I think back onto other crises we've had, I think it's quite natural when there's uncertainty, there's a flight to certainty, which short-term government bonds represent, short-term securities.
The head of NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange announced that the stock markets would remain closed tomorrow for an unprecedented fourth day in a row.
To resume trading 9:30 Monday morning.
But even a Monday opening is iffy. There are questions about whether the downtown area will be safe enough by then. Not only are some buildings still in danger of collapse, but there have been bomb scares around the city. And the markets themselves are still rebuilding their computer systems.
From just a technical point of view, a need to make sure that once the infrastructure of the marketplace is open, that it works. Because nothing could be worse than to open it prematurely and have some sort of system or power failure.
On Saturday, NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange will conduct a full-scale computer stress test. Only if the system works will the Monday opening go forward. If the markets open, what do you think is going to happen? In past crises, people pull their money out.
If we follow past patterns, again, I refer to Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth, there's been a precipitous decline and then a reversal.
At least on the internet, there's already a backlash against the conventional wisdom that Monday will see a big sell-off. Stock market chat rooms today were filled with gung-ho, bullish cheerleading. Please don't sell. If you sell, bin Laden will buy American shares. Invest in America. Even if the markets do open down on Monday, as expected, the mere fact that they're open will be seen by many as a victory.
The major firms of the world, the biggest banks and dealers, they all have issues. Downtown Manhattan is not a place where people are going, and it's not business as usual. The big banks, they all have issues. They're in the disaster sites. So I think Bank of New York lost its main site and its disaster site, so it's in number 3. So, I mean, these are not the kind of business conditions where people are going to go out and try to do a lot of business. What they're there to do is to show that the American financial system is bigger and when anything than anybody else can dish at it, and that the collective group of all the banks and dealers and firms like ours of the world can pull together, and they will make it work.
So many people in the investment community are anxious to send out reassuring signals that the system is sturdy and resilient. And yet, the whiff of pessimism about the economy is in the air, a fear about a ripple effect. There's no question that whole sectors of the economy are already affected, like the airline business and tourism. But mainly there's concern about consumer confidence, which has been the one bright light in the U.S. economy. A fear that people are less likely to go to the mall, for instance, certainly this weekend. Most analysts feel there is bound to be a psychological hit. So the question becomes, what is the half-life of fear? 2 weeks? 6 months? Nobody knows. Dan?
Leslie Stahl, thanks. Airport security is going to have a whole different look beginning today, according to authorities. Peter Van Sant has that story.
How many people going out? One person. Okay, there's no curbside check-in anymore. You have to go inside to check in.
Please empty everything out of your pockets. Keys, change, cell phones, pagers, pens.
After closing the skies for more than 2 days, the government today allowed limited airline flights to resume. amid the tightest security in U.S. history.
Anybody who would say they're comfortable is a nut.
I'm leery, but I really want to get home.
But getting anywhere in America is going to take time and a lot of patience.
Can I just sit this one on the floor behind me?
In Seattle, Delta Airlines employees began random searches of individual suitcases.
Okay.
This is just one of a series of new security measures, which include a ban on carry-on knives, no matter how small, no curbside checking of bags, boarding areas restricted to ticketed passengers, and a thorough search of planes before anyone gets on board.
We have taken every precaution to make sure that it is safe to fly in America. There's increased presence on the airplanes. Yes, I would, if a family member asked whether they should fly, I'd say yes.
And the person sitting next to you may soon be a sky marshal. Armed, plainclothes officers will be boarding many flights. And there's even more security. Sources tell CBS News that more than 800 federal agents are patrolling 17 airports around the country.
I'm all in favor of it. Beef it up, search my bags, search me, search everybody.
Is this a new day?
It is definitely a new day.
Barry Schiff is an aviation safety consultant who was a captain with TWA for 34 years. We brought him to a mock-up of a modern Boeing cockpit.
Do you support placing air marshals on airplanes today?
I absolutely support air marshals. To have plainclothes personnel on board an airplane is going to be intimidating to anyone who thinks he's going to be able to hijack an airplane.
But the last time air marshals rode into the skies, back in the 1970s, there were...
Okay, I have no IFB. Well, I found that it's a fairly boring job for them. And they get a little frustrated, a little impatient. They wanted something to happen. I had the feeling that they had itchy trigger fingers, and perhaps they could at times create more of a hazard.
I'm ready to go. This is Dave Statter at the...
Schiff believes one way to prevent future hijackings is to turn the cockpit door into a bulletproof, knockdown-proof barrier.
I think we're going to have to isolate the cockpit from the cabin, if that's at all possible. After all, cockpit doors are not like bank vaults. You can crash them down if necessary.
It's clear with the new threat, we need stronger doors, we need...
Captain Dwayne Worth is president of the Airline Pilots Association, representing thousands of pilots.
We need bolts on the doors, be able to control access to the cockpit more securely, because some of those doors are simply too flimsy.
Protecting the door is critical because once inside the cockpit, there is little a pilot can do.
Why wouldn't the pilot have, the expression is float these guys, put the plane into a dive where there's zero gravity on board and these guys are floating up on the ceiling, ask the passengers then to help subdue these guys?
Well, they could do that, but then you tend to agitate the hijackers, and they could do things you don't ordinarily want them to do. You don't have any idea as a pilot that they're going to use your airplane.
Hello, I'm Gordon Peterson in the Channel 9 newsroom. We have news from the Pentagon. Here's Dave Statter now live.
Gordon, about 6 minutes ago, we heard air horns from the fire engines outside the Pentagon. Knowing from experience, that means evacuate. I looked back, I saw some light smoke coming. The Pentagon again on fire. Apparently a collapse in the area of impact from 2 days ago. Now we have fire burning in the Pentagon. We do know that the urban search and rescue teams say they were going to be working in the impact area tonight. Our lenses have not been able to show us anybody specifically working in that area. Of course, there is the fear that there may be urban search and rescue teams in that area that collapsed tonight. Apparently a collapse because we looked back about 6 minutes ago to see white smoke coming up from the top area in the back. So then we hear the evacuation tones. Now, what we can tell you is either a collapse or some sort of fire erupted and they ordered the evacuation. We did not exactly see if anything fell down, but again, we're assuming either a collapse or a sudden fire that has quickly spread here. Again, we have flames coming out of the Pentagon. Gordon?
Dave, and no, you cannot say for sure whether there are people inside there right now.
We do not know. We had been talking all day to the urban search and rescue teams who, in that area, have been looking for the black boxes, the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder. They knew that it's in the impact area by the pinging of the emergency locator transmitters that are in the black boxes. They couldn't get to them until they shored the area up. Remember, we were told this is pretty much a recovery operation. Again, all we can tell you for sure is that there was an evacuation sounded about 7 minutes ago, 8 minutes ago now, when we heard the air horns from the fire engine, and looked back to see a puff up as if something collapsed. I should say I'm assuming something collapsed there. If not, something just rapidly caught fire, and then fire spread down from the top to the bottom there, and from your top right of your screen to the bottom left.
In terms of personnel in the area, what do you see, Dave?
It's hard to see from who might be in the building. We know the
What about outside the building?
We know